What's happening, fam? This is AF Anime. My name is John, and we're back with another One Piece chapter review, this time of One Piece chapter 1040, which is titled Wasted Words on Young Ears. And yet again, it's another thoughtful and appropriate title given this chapter's contents. This chapter is just fire. It is very similar to the last chapter in terms of how good it is, the only difference being that there isn't as much action, but we do make up for that when it comes to this chapter's dialogue and the story that it tells. But before we get into recapping this chapter's amazing content, we'll talk about the cover page, which is return to the cover story of the Vinsmoke family and their escape from Totland. And it would appear that Big Mom herself defeated Niji and Yonji. Now, on the surface, this doesn't really appear to be too different from the last page that we got from the cover story, but it does imply that those two took on Big Mom on their own. And it kind of raises the question if they really thought they could defeat her, or if they really just put themselves in a position to fight Big Mom, so that way the remainder of their family could escape. So even though Big Mom's presence on this cover page isn't necessarily a lot to add to the cover story, considering what we've gotten so far, it does raise the question as to whether or not these two brothers sacrifice themselves more or less to allow everyone to escape. And if it does present some form of character growth for those two brothers, or at the very least it shows that Judge was willing to sacrifice two of his sons for the rest of them to escape. In either case, I'm still interested to see where this story goes, but that'll do it for my thoughts on the cover page for this week. So now we can go ahead and get on with the recap for chapter 1040, which has to do with the conclusion of the fight between Kid, Big Mom, and Law. And we pick up right where we left off in the last chapter with Big Mom tanking the attack from Kid, which is titled Damned Punk. And after a little bit of exposition from the Heart and Kid pirates, we see from Big Mom that she's not necessarily being horribly affected by the attack, as she uses her soul focus to offer Kid and Law the opportunity to give up 50 years of their lives or to be forced into slavery. And as scary as that would be for most pirates, we see from Kid and Law that much like Jinbei when he left Big Mom to join the Straw Hats, they show no fear, so the move has no effect on them. And I'm not sure if the Conqueror's Haki seems to be playing into it, but her move does manage to take some of the lifespan from the Kid and Heart pirates who are surrounding the fight. And then we get this dope side-by-side panel of Kid and Law expressing their lack of fear for Big Mom, and we get to see that Law has another move up his sleeve called Re-Room. And with this new move, we get a thoughtful callback to Corazon, the man Law considers his savior, or more specifically to his Devil Fruit, which gives the ability to silence an area. So at first, upon seeing this move, I didn't think it really had a whole lot of practical use within the context of this fight. But when I think about it a little bit more, and if you take a look at this panel, you can see that the Conqueror's Haki, the typical black lightning that we see coming off of a Conqueror's user, has been turned white while inside of this room. And we all know from the Totland arc, even though Law shouldn't, Big Mom's death screams, or her screams in general, mixed with her Conqueror's Haki, could have devastating effects on the people around her. So at first, silencing things didn't seem to be a horribly practical use in this fight, but if this means that the Appi Appi no Mi user can mute the Conqueror's Haki of someone who's powerful and spare their own pirates or possibly even surrounding people from being knocked out by conquerors, that is just another overpowered ability of the Appi Appi no Mi. Moving on though, after Law shows off this new ability, Kid follows up with another Damned Punk. I don't know if this is just like a increase in output in regards to the attack, or if it's just literally another Damned Punk attack, but with this we get an amazing panel of Kid and Law attacking at the same time, with Kid using his Damned Punk ability and Law slicing the Misery attack in half. Easily my favorite panel of this chapter. So the follow-up attack from Kid sends Big Mom down into the armory where Yamato already is, and upon doing this, Big Mom punches one of the frozen bombs and manages to set it off and explode, which breaks some of the floor apart on the floor of Onigashima. Now, Yamato and the remaining bombs were spared from any damage from this explosion, as she created an ice wall to block herself and the other explosives from being affected. Big Mom, however, if you pay attention to the chapter, seems like she actually managed to damage herself in doing this pointless strike on an explosive. Now, after this, as Big Mom falls to the actual ground level below Onigashima, we get some pensive thoughts from her, but before that, we actually get 3 panels showing us the apparition that Kanjuro created to set off the bombs. And it's unclear really what's going on here, but it would appear to me at the very least that the apparition is fizzling away. And to be honest, I'm not 100% sure on how I feel about this. I mean, it does seem like a good way to wrap up the whole tense Yamato saving the Onigashima from an explosion thing, but at the same time it also kind of feels like an underwhelming end to the will of Kanjuro and Orochi. But with that being said, the next thing we get to see is Big Mom having some inner thoughts or some inner monologue about the will of Roger and what he did just before passing on. And as she's fallen to the ground, Big Mom considers her defeat as being a bout of bad luck, but in doing so, she pensively thinks about Roger and his effect on the new era of pirates, or more specifically, how shady it was for Roger to use his dying act to create this new era of piracy, where her, Kaido, and the likes of her generation would have to deal with these upstarts. And these thoughts on Roger's influence on the pirates who just defeated her are wrapped up with her wondering about the One Piece or whether or not it is even real. So with all this inner monologue, we get some interesting panels showing us the effects of the explosion on the remainder of Onigashima. And we can see that the explosion has reached Chopper, Zoro, and is even in the background of the panel with Robin and Brook. And another place that the explosion seems to have reached is the room where Hiyori and Orochi are. And it appears the explosion's effects have also reached the room where Orochi and Hiyori are. And this panel seems to be a little bit interesting as Hiyori has her mask on, and I can't imagine as to why she's doing that, but I guess we can talk about that towards the discussion portion of the video. But the next thing we get to see is a 3-panel update on the fight between Fukurokuju and Raizo. And it looks like Fukurokuju is on the ground roasting in flames. It's unclear whether or not he was knocked to the ground by the explosion, but it would appear that this is the end of this ninja fight, which I'm more than okay with. I mean, ultimately I did find this fight underwhelming, maybe to be more entertaining in the anime, but I will say at least that if this is how Raizo won his fight, by seeing who can endure flames for the longest, it's a nice callback to the death of Odin, and it also is a kind of, gangster way for him to kind of outlast his opponent in endurance. But ultimately we don't get an official declaration as to whether or not that fight's over. But with the next couple pages we do get the official declaration that Kid and Law are the winners of their fight. But we do get a little bit of dialogue from Big Mom stating that she won't die from the attack, which I think most of us can probably assume anyway. Now, although her survival is all but guaranteed, we do actually see that when she hits the ground, some of the explosives fell with her. I mean, I had to zoom in just to be sure, but I can't deny that these explosives had to have had some effect on damaging her. So even though after the attack of Kid and Law were completed and she was still having this monologue and still talking, the resulting explosion from this fall might be what actually takes her out of the fight for the time being. So the next page shows us another cool side-by-side panel of Kid and Law, as well as their pirate crews celebrating in their victory. And we can see on the last page that the hole that was created by the explosion that Big Mom created, Yamato can now see Momonosuke, and they have a little bit of dialogue about Zunisha. And as I suspected in my last chapter review, Zunisha was the one calling out to Momonosuke, but we also get the reveal in this chapter that Zunisha is a criminal of the past and also was a companion of Joy Boy. And with that statement, that ends the chapter, and it raises some serious questions, but we'll address that in the discussion portion coming up here very soon. So again, just like last week's chapter, this chapter was amazing, easily a 9.5 out of 10. I mean, it was another near perfect chapter, and there's a few things that I would change, but ultimately, the way the story played out in this chapter and the dialogue that we got, the inner monologue that we got, it was all near perfect. I mean, overall, I am satisfied with the way that Big Mom was taken out of the fight when it comes to Wano. So in regards to the discussion, one of the first things I want to talk about is the future of Big Mom when it comes to this conflict. Now, when it comes to the inner monologue that we got from her in this chapter about Roger and the new era of pirates, I get the feeling that she's going to be done when it comes to challenging the upstarts and the new generation. And with that, we might get the reappearance of the remainder of her children who are present on Wano, with them saving her, possibly even giving them a little bit of their own lifespan so that way she can get up and either come to Luffy's aid or possibly even just leave Wano and return to her homeland. And another thing to think about in regards to her defeat from Kid and Law, this has got to be a very demoralizing loss to some of the remainder of the Animal Kingdom pirates and their holdouts. So with that being said, if Big Mom is officially labeled as being defeated, this might change the actions of the world government who were just outside Wano, as well as expedite the urgency felt by the CP0 members who are out to catch Robin. And also in regards to Big Mom's defeat, one thing we can note is that she took at least some of the explosives with her when she fell down through that hole. So even though it was hard to think of how Kid and Law could have their victory declared, I think this was a perfect way to end the fight between the Yonko and two of the worst generation. I mean, when you go back to the Sabaody archipelago, who would have thought that this panel here with the three upcoming worst generation members side by side would lead to a moment like this. Another thing worth mentioning is that during the dialogue, we did get some updates with some of the Straw Hats and other characters. For example, we see that Brook and Robin are still on the loose and have not yet been approached or captured by CP0. And we also see that the situations with Zoro and Chopper are kind of unchanging. The explosion did reach them to some extent, but they haven't appeared to take any further damage or really haven't updated their current situations. And we can also see from Komurasaki or Hiyori and Orochi that their situation also is fairly unchanged. So she's still playing music, he's still doting on her, and the only update we can see is that the explosion was felt. So the only interesting thing I can glean about their presence in this chapter is that if that explosion was felt and Orochi knows that the explosion was unsuccessful in destroying Onigashima, this could change the plans of Hiyori, who might have been just trying to keep Orochi present for the explosion so they can both go down with the ship, per se. And if that is the case, we should see an escalation in the situation between Hiyori and Orochi, which I am okay with, since we did get that quote from Hiyori long ago talking to Zoro saying that she wanted to be the one to kill Orochi. And another point of discussion would be the conclusion of the Raizo fight, if that is indeed what we saw during this chapter. As I've said before many times, I don't really find this fight super entertaining, but if this is how the fight ends, I am more than okay with it, and I think it is a justifiable way to give Raizo his credit. It would mean that he was able to withstand the flames to win his fight in a similar fashion to Oden withstanding that boiling oil. Now, defeating Fukurokuju in this fashion would officially make him the strongest ninja on Wano, but at the same time it would probably also take him out of the fight in the same way that most of the Red Scabbards seem to be going towards the end of the Wano arc. It seems like they're all going to be out of commission by the time Luffy reaches his conclusion of defeating Kaido. Alright, so the last point of discussion in regards to this chapter is going to be the whole situation with Zunisha. The information we get is very loaded. I mean, we hear that he was a companion of Joy Boy, which is very interesting, and we also hear that he committed a crime. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but when it comes to animals within the world of One Piece, they aren't typically associated as criminals, even if they do something wrong. So with that being said, it does lend some credence to the thought of Zunisha being associated with the mention of a devil fruit by the Gorosei at the end of chapter 1037. So that does bring up the interesting possibility about whether or not Zunisha is in fact an elephant, or possibly at some point is or was a human, or maybe even a giant. Now, the only thing that would fly in the face of that thought process would be the fact that Zunisha has been alive or around for at least 800 years. And as far as I know, I think the official statement about the lifespan of giants in particular, who have the longest known lifespan of the characters in One Piece. One small theory I can think of that could fill in this gap would be the fact that Zunisha may be a human or a creature with a devil fruit who was given the immortality from the Appi Appi no Mi, and this almost certainly would be a crime in the eyes of the world government. But to be honest, I have no idea where Oda's going with this whole situation. I'm incredibly excited to see this storyline in particular fleshed out. In any case, that's going to do it for my review on chapter 1040 of One Piece. Another amazingly fire chapter from Oda, 2 weeks in a row. Definitely appreciate that. Let me know in the comments section down below what you guys think about this chapter, what you think about any of the discussion points I made about Big Mom and her future, as well as Zunisha and his past. So thank you guys very much for tuning in. If you enjoyed this content, please like, share, and subscribe. Or if you just want to rap about One Piece in general, also hit the comment section up. My name is John from AF Anime. Thank you guys very much for tuning in, and I'll see you guys in the next video.